Welcome to Tell Us a Story, the podcast dedicated to the stories that connect us through our shared life experiences, as well as the stories that reveal the sometimes stark differences. Only by truly listening to one another can we bridge the gaps that divide us, fostering empathy, respect, and kindness with one another. In this episode, Dr. Bettye Baker shares her experiences growing up in Louisville, Kentucky during segregation. Bettye has been dedicated to promoting racial equality from a young age and shares her experiences of growing up in Louisville and her thoughts for the future. So let's listen as Bettye tells us a story.
My name is Bettye Foster Baker. Foster is my maiden name. I was born in Louisville, Kentucky in 1937. So that means I'm 87 years old. I'm very proud of that, and I fundamentally have been in education in all of my life. I grew up in a family of educators, and so it was very important to me to be able to become a teacher. My aunt had taught for 47 years, and I can remember as a child helping her write her sentence strips for her reading lessons. And so I started out my career as a teacher, and I taught for about 13 years, and then I went into education administration. I had gotten the appropriate degrees so that I could become a school administrator, and became a director of curriculum, instruction, and administrative affairs, director of child study. I have also been a director of instruction and curriculum and special services for 2 school districts, and I retired at actually 55. So I felt very fortunate that I was able to do that. My husband, who was 6 years older than I, made it possible for us to retire at the same time. And so I've been retired for over 35 years, but that hasn't really stopped me. Growing up in the segregated Jim Crow South has informed my life from birth until this present day. And I feel very honored that I am able to share this story, because stories are important. That's how we learn history. And so I am so happy that I can share today what it meant to me to grow up in Louisville, Kentucky, in the segregated South. It's a unique story because it's a story of survival, it's a story of determination, and it's a story of a very deep foundation from family, friends, and community. My opportunities have been provided not just from my own efforts, but from the efforts of those who have been with me and have helped me all of my life. And that includes primarily my teachers. Growing up in the South, you went to segregated schools. You could not go into a department store in Louisville, such as Stewart's or Kaufman Strauss. It was a difficult time because you couldn't even try on a pair of gloves. If you did or attempted to, then you were told that colored people were not allowed to try on anything in the store. So these were messages that we got very overt growing up. But we also had the NAACP that fundamentally trained us in nonviolent protest. And those protests were fundamental to our development from the time we were 13 and 14 years old. That's when we began our demonstrations and our sit-ins in Louisville. And that was an opportunity that was very, very significant in my life because it's fundamentally informed pretty much everything that I do. And even today I work on racial justice and social justice, but primarily racial justice. We would go into department stores, primarily the 5 and 10 lunch counters. We would sit there, and we were taught that we could eat ketchup and salt that was on the counters, and when we were asked to leave, we would not leave until the police came. If they called the police and the police came and asked us to leave, we were taught to get up, to leave, and not get into any kind of discussion or confrontation with the police. And that went on for quite a while, and sit-ins became very popular, and particularly when Dr. King became a leader and helped all of us define our roles and to make a difference in terms of getting rid of segregation. I was graduated from high school in 1955, and Brown versus Board of Education was passed by the Supreme Court in May of 1954. So I had always gone to segregated schools until we integrated the University of Louisville. And when I attended there were several black students. There were approximately 5 of us who actually went to U of L as a group. But there were at least 3 or 4 students who had been there before us, because it was approximately the 4th year that the university had been desegregated. And of course, I recall Neville Tucker, who married one of my dear friends. He was in the law school at that time, and he was the first African American to attend the University of Louisville Law School and to graduate. His father, Eubanks Tucker, was a very famous attorney and judge in Louisville, and was the only black judge in Louisville at that time. We worked very hard, but it was a little difficult because we had been taught to do our work, but what we found out, if we wanted a higher grade, we had to not just do our work, but we had to do a lot more than our work. Being in elementary education, there were numerous books that we had to read, children's books that we had to read and report on. And so we would read, if the teacher said, okay, we're going to do 5 books, we would do 5 books. But then we noticed that the students who got the best grades had read 10 books. And so we learned, well, you're going to have to do a lot more than what the teacher or instructor tells you to do if you want the best grades, and so that's what we did. I grew up in an upper middle class family in Louisville. We lived across from Chickasaw Park. And the teachers, black physicians, black lawyers, black businessmen lived on Southwestern Parkway. And each of these people built their homes, and I can remember when we built our home, it was quite an achievement for our family to save $18,000 and to be able to purchase a home and to build a home, and that's what our home cost. There were others that cost a lot more, but our neighborhood was one that was very cohesive. Again, it was a segregated neighborhood. There were about 3 blocks or 4 blocks of houses, and then beyond our block were white families that lived, and both across that particular area and all the way down Broadway to probably the 30th Street. You would have gone several blocks down Broadway to get to the black area. But blacks also lived up on 5th Street, which was a wonderful area that had a lot of brownstones, and you had some professional blacks who lived there. Dr. Parrish, who was the first African American selected to teach at the University of Louisville, lived on 5th Street. So that was the community I was reared in, but I think about that because we had very, very little dealings with children who were not on our socioeconomic level. We saw them in school, we were just friends in school, but I'm saying we were not, families weren't friends, and they were not a part of your social community. And that's a form of segregation too. You know, you recognize, well, wait a minute, you're kind of doing some of the same things that are being done to you. And that's very, very, that is something that I think about a lot as I've grown older. And the interesting thing is you take Mary Frances Perry, who came from a poor family, but she was probably one of the smartest people in our class. And she did a wonderful, she went on and got her degrees and everything, but she was never really a part of our, quote, group. And so I think about that sometimes, and we talk about it, but it is what it is. And but you have some similarities there that with the oppression that not necessarily, we didn't oppress anyone, but we did not necessarily include everyone. And that was that's something I think about as I've grown older and go and reflect back on our relationships with youngsters who lived in Eddy Alley and some of the places that we knew where they lived, but we didn't live there, but we knew where those places were, where the poorer families lived. And that was something that I didn't pay much attention to growing up. But as I've gotten older, I've been able to look back and reflect on that. And I think it's probably, in fact, I know it's still true today. Tennis was very large in our lives. My father was a good tennis player. He was also a golfer. But you couldn't play golf in Louisville, so he really didn't get into golf until he moved to California. And he got into golf, and he often talked about when he played with Joe Louis. And I'm sure he did because he was quite a tennis player as well. But we played tennis, and then when I wasn't playing tennis, I was at Girl Scout camp. And so Girl Scout camp was very important in my life. I became a scout at 8 years old at James Bond Elementary School. And our leader, her name was Sarah Bundy. Sarah came down, I was in second grade at the time, and she came down to James Bond School, and she wanted very much to attract us and get us interested in scouting. So we joined Troop 108, and that was Bunny's troop. We were the first black troop in Kentucky, and we had just an unbelievable time working together and camping together and learning all the camping skills and learning and earning our badges. I still have my sash from when I was in Girl Scouting. And I was in Scouting from grade 2 all the way through college. Camp Shanatuck was the Girl Scout camp there. It was segregated, and we were among the first to integrate Camp Shanatuck. Later, I represented Kentucky as the first African American to attend the Girl Scout National Encampment in Cody, Wyoming. And I think I was 14 at the time. And I also became the president of the Kentucky Senior Scouts. The women and young people that I associated with in scouting were primarily white. And so part of that role and objective was to bring us together so that we could get to know one another. And that was what it was all about, because we integrated Camp Shanatuck. We were the first blacks to go in there. And so from the time I was I think we were probably maybe in our 10, 11, in that time frame, we were working with white scouts, and we were in scouting. And so we had the opportunity through scouting to be with the people who were not the same as we in terms of the color of our skin. And there were very specific guidelines that they actually taught us in terms of how the importance of being able to get along, the importance of how scouting was universally a group of girls who accepted each other for who they were and not for what they looked like. I mean, these were things they were very overt about. So I think scouting put me in touch with me. And then, I remember I said I was at the University of Louisville, and so we were very much in the minority there. But it was interesting because I had been in scouting with Barbara Bailey since I was probably about 10 years old, or 11, and she was white, and she went to the University of Louisville also. And you remember these people because they were very significant in your life. I feel so extremely blessed that I had people surrounding me in Louisville that allowed me to believe in myself. And that was one of the major objectives of our teachers. They told us that one day you will go to school with white children, and when you do, you will be ready. And they were right. We had to work very, very hard in our classes. And I recall when I was 13, our Mrs. LaForest, who was our 7th grade English teacher, but Ms. LaForest decided, having read an opportunity in her English, from the English journal there that they shared in Louisville across the segregated schools and white schools. She knew everything that was going on in the schools. And she learned that the Lions Club was sponsoring a contest, Why I Love America. And that contest was, she said, now everyone is going to write an essay. And whether you want to or not, you're all going to write an essay. You're going to do your research, and you're going to learn the 5 freedoms. You're going to learn everything that you can about that you have learned in your social studies classes. You're going to apply that to your essays. And we're going to all write, and I am going to be reviewing each and every word, which she did. So Ms. LaForest submitted my essay to the Lions Club, and I won one of the prizes. There were two white girls, and I was the only African American in Louisville who won the prize. The Lions Club, as you know, is a very prestigious white club, male club. They always met at the Brown Hotel, and the Brown Hotel was the most prestigious hotel in Louisville. That particular hotel always attracted the most wealthy individuals who were there in Louisville. But the Lions Club had their meetings there, and when the hotel found out that one of the winners, that would be me, was black, they refused to serve me in the hotel. And so the Lions Club had to move their luncheon to the Sealback Hotel in Louisville, and they said, of course, we will serve Miss Foster, and that's what they did. It made the New York Times. It's in the May edition of Time magazine, which I have a copy of. Sweet Land of Liberty is the title of the article in Time magazine, and they talked in a paragraph about how unfortunate it was that they refused to serve me. But all of these things, when I attended, I was just so thrilled to be there to get my prize, which was, I can't remember how much money it was, but it was sufficient monies that I was able to go with my seventh grade class to New York City. There was a trip that was being planned, and I feel confident that my family could afford it to send me, but that money took me to New York City, and I had an extraordinary experience. We stayed at the Charles Hotel there in New York, and it wasn't a great hotel. I knew what good hotels look like because I had been in them, and it was okay because I'm quite sure that they were going where they knew that the students could afford to go. And we had a wonderful time. We were in the Empire State Building. We were able to look at all of the sites there in New York, and the streets and all the cars, and it was just remarkable. I can't remember all the places that we visited. We went to a play there. We went we didn't go to a church service, but we were able to visit churches. St. John's, I think we visited there in Harlem. We actually saw Harlem. We had heard so much about Harlem, and we were able to see that and to have the experience of being in New York for almost a week. And it was just extraordinary. If you have been free all of your life and been able to go to any restaurant, go in any store, try on any outfit that you think you might like to have. We had three theaters in Louisville. We had the Lyric, the Palace, and the Grand Theater on Walnut Street, and those were our theaters. But if we wanted to see some of the films that required much larger screens, we would have to go to Cincinnati, Ohio, because we were unable to. Our theaters were unable. Theaters were unable to accommodate the large screens, and I can remember going to Cincinnati to see Cinderella and probably several other films that I could not see in Louisville, and so that was an experience because you really realized what it meant, what segregation really meant. When you had to leave your town to go to see a film that was in your town, but you couldn't see it because you were a person of color, and in our case, you were black. So if you've been free all your life, able to go wherever you want to go, we actually lived and grew up in a different America. That was not the America that I grew up in. But we were always taught to love America. And that was the thing that really may surprise people, because even though we were segregated, and even though we knew that people didn't think that we were worthy, that we were equal, we were taught that we were more than equal. And so that made such a difference in our lives, because we did not grow up thinking that we were not able to achieve and that we were not able to obtain anything that we wanted, that if we were willing to work for it, we could obtain it. And that was the kind of message that was given to me from the time I can always remember being told about how one has to think about themselves, how one has to believe in themselves. And most of my friends were like that. What does surprise me, though, is how little many of my white friends and many of the whites that I come in contact with, how little they know about black people and our history and what has happened in our lifetimes to cause us to be so diligent about our freedom. As I look now back on my growing up and my background and all that I have been through in growing up in the segregated South, and then I look at all of the diversity programs that are being removed and also that are being removed at our academies, and it seems like that they're trying to turn us back to a different era that I grew up in. But America is a different place than where I grew up. The majority of Americans believe that our nation can be that one that allows every individual to have the opportunity that they deserve. We see that our courts are standing up and are turning back many of these initiatives that don't promote equal opportunity and fairness for all Americans. And that's what America is. It's a place where we can come together and actively support the lessons that we all learn growing up in terms of how to love one another. We learn kindness, we learn compassion, and those are the things that will hold our nation together. This is a wonderful country, and I wouldn't trade anything in the world for being born in the United States of America and having the opportunity to become a person who is comfortable, who is happy, and who has faith in the people that I am associated with, but most important, faith in one of the greatest countries in the world. And I do feel very strongly about that. I lived in Izmir, Turkey for 3 years. I have had opportunities that have allowed me to visit and to tour countries all over the world. I have had friends in those countries, and I have learned that people are people. And what people most love and respect is the fact that you accept and honor their humanness. And I think that's very, very important.
Thank you, Bettye, for sharing your experiences with us. Please review the show notes for links about Bettye, as well as for more information about this podcast, or visit our website at tellusastory.info.